55 confirmed deaths, hundreds of injuries, and a corporation worth hundreds of billions of dollars that has spent decades making sure you never think about any of it. These are the Disney accidents they hope you forget. An 18-year-old on her dream summer job called her parents with the happiest news of her life. Hours later, she was dead inside the walls of Disneyland's most beloved theater. Story 1. The America Sings Rotating Theater Death. July 8th, 1974. Disneyland's Tomorrowland. A warm California summer evening with crowds still filling the park long after sunset. 18-year-old Debbie Stone had recently landed what she considered her dream summer job, working as a hostess at America Sings, one of Tomorrowland's most popular attractions. The show featured animatronic animals performing patriotic songs across 6 rotating stages, with audiences sitting in moving seating sections that spun to face each new scene as the performance progressed. Debbie's role was simple. She greeted guests at the start of each show and said goodbye to them at the end. That evening, before her shift began, she called her parents with news that made them beam. She had fallen in love and wanted their blessing to get engaged. Her parents gave it. She headed into Disneyland for her evening shift on top of the world. As one show cycle ended and guests filed out, Debbie stood near the edge of the rotating stage saying her farewells, exactly as her role required. The platforms began their automated shift to reset for the next cycle. Between the stationary wall and the moving stage sat a narrow gap, one the designers had failed to account for adequately. A gap that closed completely as the platforms rotated. Debbie was standing in it. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the theater. Many guests assumed it was a theatrical effect they had not noticed before. 20 minutes passed and Debbie did not reappear. When staff finally located her, they found her body crushed between the 2 rotating walls. The impact had killed her instantly. The investigation revealed a critical design failure. There were no sensors anywhere in the system designed to detect whether someone was standing in the dangerous zone between the stationary wall and the moving stage. As far as the machinery was concerned, the space was simply empty. Disneyland shut the attraction down, added safety lighting and breakaway walls, and reopened months later. But cast members and guests began reporting strange occurrences afterward. Whispers in empty hallways. Footsteps with no source. A young woman's voice calling out where no one stood. America Sings closed permanently in 1988. Its animatronic characters were relocated to other attractions across the park where they still perform today. The story of the 18-year-old who called her parents with the happiest news of her life and died hours later inside her dream job remains one of the most haunting chapters in Disneyland's history. Coming up, a routine late-night monorail run, a single forgotten switch, and a 21-year-old pilot who saw what was coming but could not stop it. Story 2. The Monorail Collision. September 5th, 2009. Walt Disney World, Florida. Well past midnight. 21-year-old Austin Winenberg was piloting the purple monorail train during the park's final transport cycle of the evening, carrying the last guests back to their hotels. At the same time, another pilot operating the pink train had received clearance from Central Control to move into the overnight parking area. To reach the parking track, the pink train needed to reverse direction and switch onto a different set of tracks. Standard procedure performed regularly, without incident. That night, the control panel operator forgot to flip the track switch. Instead of diverting to the parking track, the pink train continued along its regular route, heading directly toward Austin's purple train, which still carried 6 passengers. Austin was the only person who saw what was coming. He slammed the emergency brakes, attempted to reverse, and shouted urgent warnings over the radio. There was not enough time. The 2 trains collided at the station platform. All 6 passengers survived, shaken but physically unharmed. Austin, positioned in the pilot's cabin at the front of his train, absorbed the full force of the collision and died instantly. The investigation confirmed that the dispatcher had failed to switch the tracks before authorizing the pink train's movement. OSHA. Fine Disney $44,000 for the safety violations. Austin had been weeks away from graduating college. The monorail still operates today, carrying thousands of guests daily. Most of them have no idea that in 2009, a forgotten switch cost a 21-year-old his life. Next, maintenance workers at Disneyland ignored warning signs for weeks. On the day everything finally failed, 2 friends were sitting in the front car with nowhere to go. Story 3. Big Thunder Mountain Derailment. September 5th, 2003. Disneyland, California. 22-year-old Marcelo Torres and his friend Vicente Gutierrez had spent the day working through the park's major attractions. After several intense rides, the group decided to slow down with Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, the family-friendly runaway mine train that winds through an Old West landscape. Gentle climbs, scenic curves, the kind of ride nobody worries about. Marcelo and Vicente chose the front car, positioned directly behind the decorative locomotive engine. The ride launched normally. Nothing in the first moment suggested what was about to happen. Then, midway through the course, metal began scraping against metal beneath the train, a grinding that did not belong. Before anyone could process what they were hearing, the decorative locomotive detached from the passenger cars, slammed upward into the tunnel ceiling, and crashed back down directly onto the car where Marcelo was sitting. His chest was crushed, multiple ribs shattered, both lungs punctured. Vicente lost consciousness from the impact. Other passengers screamed as the ride ground to a halt inside the dark tunnel. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. Marcelo died at the scene. The investigation uncovered deeply troubling details. Maintenance workers had been flagging issues with Big Thunder Mountain for weeks before the accident. On the day of the crash, warning lights appeared on the control panel indicating a mechanical problem. But employees had hesitated to shut the ride down, afraid of repercussions from management for taking a popular attraction offline during park hours. The root cause was two bolts securing a wheel assembly that had not been properly tightened during a recent maintenance check. As the train cycled, those bolts gradually worked loose until they fell out completely. Without them, a critical axle jammed into the track and caused the derailment. Disneyland admitted fault and settled with Marcelo's family for an undisclosed amount. His parents donated $400,000 from that settlement to Brooks College to establish an animation scholarship in their son's name, keeping the dream he had been working toward alive in the world even after he was gone. Coming up, Christmas Eve, 1998, a scenic boat ride, a piece of rope that should never have been used, and a 9-pound metal cleat that flew through the air like a bullet into a crowd of families. Story 4. The Sailing Ship Columbia Accident. December 24th, 1998, Christmas Eve at Disneyland. Luan Phi Dawson, his wife Lu Tui Vuong, their son and grandson were celebrating the holiday with a scenic tour aboard the sailing ship Columbia, a full-scale replica of an 18th-century merchant vessel that circles the rivers of America. After a full day at the park, the Columbia felt like exactly the right kind of calm. As the massive ship approached its dock, crew members prepared to secure it using mooring ropes, standard docking procedure performed hundreds of times before. But instead of using the park's standard hemp ropes, which were specifically designed to snap under excessive tension and prevent dangerous rebound, workers had substituted cheaper nylon rope, hemp brakes. Nylon stretches, holds, and when the tension becomes too great, it releases everything at once. As the Columbia drifted toward the dock, a crew member looped the nylon rope around a heavy cast-iron cleat bolted to the ship's aging wooden deck. The ship's momentum pulled the rope taut. The pressure built beyond what the deteriorating hull had been built to withstand. The cast-iron cleat ripped free from the deck with explosive force. It launched through the air at lethal velocity and struck Luan Phi Dawson directly in the head. It also struck Lu Tui Vuong, shattering her jaw. Both collapsed instantly on the dock. Their son and grandson were standing just feet away and witnessed everything. Lu Tui Vuong survived after multiple surgeries and nearly a year of rehabilitation. Luan Phi Dawson never regained consciousness and was pronounced brain dead 11 hours later. The investigation identified multiple simultaneous failures: wrong rope material, a deteriorating hull that had not been properly maintained, a docking procedure that had been rushed and mishandled. Disneyland settled the lawsuit for $25 million. Then the park pressure washed the blood from the dock, posted a sign reading "Under Construction," and quietly removed the ship for repairs. Guests who visited in the hours that followed had no way of knowing a man had died there. A 4-year-old boy wearing Mickey Mouse ears was about to take one final ride before heading home. His family had no idea it would be the last normal moment of their lives together. Story 5. Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin. September 22nd, 2000, Disneyland, California. 4-year-old Brandon Zucker was wearing his favorite Mickey Mouse ears as his family chose their final ride of the evening. Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin. A whimsical dark ride through the cartoon world of Toontown. Brandon sat in the front of the cab with his mother. His father and older brother Nicholas rode in the cab directly behind them. As the ride moved through dark tunnels filled with bright cartoon imagery, Brandon's mother felt her son's weight shift in a way that did not feel right. Before she could react, he slipped from the vehicle and fell onto the track below. His father, riding behind them, saw his youngest son disappear beneath the ride. He screamed for operators to stop the system, hit the emergency call button, and leapt from his own still-moving cab onto the track. the ride did not stop. One of the spinning cabs rolled over Brandon's small body and crushed him against the concrete track. He lay trapped there for agonizing minutes while the system continued moving around him. By the time operators finally stopped the ride and emergency crews reached him, Brandon was not breathing. Paramedics performed CPR at the scene and restored his heartbeat. But the damage was irreversible. Severe brain injury from oxygen deprivation, a crushed pelvis, a collapsed lung, significant internal bleeding. Brandon spent weeks in a coma. When he finally opened his eyes, doctors delivered the news his family had been dreading. He would never walk, never speak, never live independently. Investigations found the lap bar restraint had malfunctioned and failed to lock properly before the ride began. There were also no physical barriers along the track to prevent a rider from falling into the path of oncoming vehicles. Witnesses stated that staff ignored the family's desperate pleas to stop the ride for critical minutes while Brandon was trapped underneath. The Zucker family won their lawsuit. Disney funded Brandon's around-the-clock medical care. The ride was temporarily closed and new safety features installed. For 8 years, Brandon lived in constant pain, entirely dependent on feeding tubes and full-time care. On January 26, 2009, at 13 years old, he died. The coroner ruled his death directly linked to the injuries he had sustained on Roger Rabbit's cartoon spin nearly 9 years earlier. The ride still operates today. A 2-year-old playing near the water while his parents watched from the beach. And an alligator that Disney had known lived there for years without ever posting a single warning sign. Story 6. The Alligator Attack at Grand Floridian. June 14, 2016. Disney's Grand Floridian Resort, Florida. The Graves family from Nebraska had saved for this vacation. As the sun set over Seven Seas Lagoon, Matt and Melissa watched from the beach while 9-year-old Ella played nearby, and 2-year-old Lane splashed at the water's edge in the shallow area just beyond the resort's beach. Without any warning, a wild alligator came out of the shallow water and grabbed Lane by the head, dragging him into the lagoon before anyone had time to process what was happening. Matt Graves went into the water immediately, wrapped his hands around the alligator and tried to force its jaws open. He fought with the specific ferocity of a father who refuses to accept what is happening. The alligator pulled Lane beneath the surface and disappeared into the dark water. Dive teams, wildlife officials, and law enforcement arrived within minutes. More than 50 alligators were removed from the lagoon during the search. 16 hours later, Lane's body was found intact approximately 15 yards from where he had been taken. He had drowned shortly after being pulled under. Disney had been removing alligators from Seven Seas Lagoon as standard operational practice for years. There were no warning signs on that beach about alligators. Only no swimming signs that most guests assumed referred to water quality rather than dangerous wildlife. After Lane's death, Disney installed fencing and posted new signs warning of alligators and snakes. The Graves family did not sue. They created the Lane Thomas Foundation to support families navigating traumatic loss. Disney donated $3 million to a children's hospital trauma center in Nebraska in Lane's memory. One warning sign. That was all it would have required. A ride designed to simulate space travel. 2 deaths on the same attraction in 13 months. And a corporation that kept pointing to the warnings they posted as sufficient. Story 7. Mission. Space deaths. Mission Space at Disney's Epcot used powerful centrifuge technology to simulate the physical experience of a rocket launch toward Mars, generating the kind of G-forces that astronaut candidates train for months to handle. In its early years, ambulances were called to the attraction nearly 200 times to treat guests who had fainted, experienced chest pain, or struggled to breathe after riding. Disney posted health warnings at the entrance. They considered the situation managed. In June 2005, a 4-year-old boy who met the height requirement was allowed to board. He had an undiagnosed heart condition. After the ride ended, he collapsed and died shortly after arriving at hospital. Medical examiners determined the G-forces had triggered a fatal cardiac event. Disney maintained they bore no liability because the warnings had been clearly posted. The family's position was that a 4-year-old child cannot read, understand, or apply a medical warning about cardiac stress, and that cast members should have exercised judgment regardless of height requirements. 13 months later, a 49-year-old woman rode Mission Space, developed severe chest pain afterward, and died from a stroke at hospital. 2 deaths on the same attraction within just over a year. Public pressure forced Disney to act. In 2006, Mission Space was split into 2 versions. The original Orange Team experience retained full centrifuge intensity. A new Green Team version offered the same visual experience with dramatically reduced physical demands. medical emergencies at the attraction dropped significantly. For the families who had already lost someone, the changes arrived too late to mean anything. Disney's first water park. Natural lake water pumped directly into the swimming area, and a microscopic organism living in that water that destroys the human brain from the inside. Story 8. River Country Brain-Eating Amoeba. 1980. Disney's River Country Water Park, Florida. An 11-year-old boy spent a hot day at River Country, Disney's first dedicated water park, which had opened in the 1970s beside Bay Lake. The park drew water directly from the lake through a filtration system into a man-made swimming lagoon. The filtration removed visible debris and bacteria. Disney presented it as a clean, safe, natural experience. Days after his visit, the boy developed severe headaches, fever, and confusion. His condition deteriorated with alarming speed. Within a week, he was dead. The cause was Naegleria fowleri, a rare and almost universally fatal brain-eating amoeba that thrives in warm freshwater. It had entered his body through his nasal passage while he was swimming, traveled to his brain, and systematically destroyed his nervous system. Testing of Bay Lake confirmed the water was full of the organism. River Country's filtration system had never been designed to eliminate it. Disney's response was to state that such amoebas were commonly present in natural lakes during summer months, and that the company did not consider itself responsible. No significant changes were made. No warnings were posted. The park continued operating. In 2001, with no public statement and no explanation of any kind, River Country closed permanently. The park was abandoned exactly as it stood. Today, rusting water slides and crumbling pool edges sit hidden behind vegetation on Disney property, slowly disappearing into the Florida landscape. The 11-year-old boy who died in 1980 remains the only confirmed fatality. How many others swam in that water across River Country's 25 years of operation and came away with illnesses never traced back to their visit has never been publicly addressed by Disney at all. A stage technician 60 feet above the ground. No safety harness provided. No protective platform. A fall that Disney's own negligence made entirely preventable. Story 9. The Hyperion Theater Fall. April 22, 2003. Disney California Adventure. The Hyperion Theater. 36-year-old Christopher Bowman was a stage technician working on the preparation of Aladdin, a musical spectacular, one of the most ambitious live productions the California parks had ever staged. He was working on a catwalk approximately 60 feet above the stage floor. Elevated work that is entirely standard in large theatrical productions and entirely safe when the appropriate equipment is provided. Christopher Bowman was not provided with a safety harness. He was not given access to a protective platform. He was working 60 feet above concrete with none of the fall protection that workplace safety regulations exist specifically to require. He lost his balance and fell. The head injuries were catastrophic. He was placed in a coma and died on May 18, 2003, after several weeks without regaining consciousness. The California Labor Department found Disney's negligence clear and unambiguous and issued a fine accordingly. Christopher Bowman's death was not an accident in the sense of something unforeseeable. It was the predictable consequence of a decision not to provide equipment that might have saved his life. A 66-year-old woman on a Jungle Cruise boat, a broken hip, 5 months of rehabilitation, and an infection that turned a day at Disneyland into a death sentence. Story 10. The Jungle Cruise Injury. August 2021. Disneyland, California. 66-year-old Joanne Aguilar visited the park with her 2 daughters. Aguilar used a wheelchair, and when the group arrived at the Jungle Cruise, a wheelchair-accessible boat was not available. Rather than skip the ride, they decided to manage the transfer to a standard boat together. When disembarking at the end of the ride, Aguilar lost her balance and fell. The impact fractured her right femur. She underwent surgery and spent 5 months in a rehabilitation center recovering. During that time, she developed a serious infection that led to septic shock. On January 29, 2022, Joanne Aguilar died. Her family filed a lawsuit alleging that cast members had failed to provide adequate assistance during disembarkation and had mocked her difficulty rather than helping her. Disney disputed the claims and stated the accident was the result of her own decision to board a standard boat. What is not in dispute is that a woman went to Disneyland for a day with her daughters and never came home. January 1984. The Matterhorn bobsleds. A restraint found buckled on the wrong seat, and a discovery inside the tunnels that made riders on the adjacent track shield their children's eyes. Story 11. The Matterhorn Tragedy. January 3, 1984. Disneyland, California. 48-year-old Dolly Regina Young was riding the Matterhorn bobsleds, the classic coaster that races through artificial ice tunnels at speeds exceeding 40 kilometers per hour. Staff performed their standard restraint check before the ride launched. Nothing appeared unusual. Moments into the ride, screams began echoing through the mountain. Not the excited screams of thrill riders, something different in their register. The ride stopped. One man riding with his young daughters pulled them close and quietly told them not to open their eyes. On the adjacent track, visible to riders passing through that section of the mountain, lay Dolly Young's body. Her seat restraint was found buckled on the seat beside her, not around her. Whether it had failed mechanically, whether she had unfastened it herself, or whether something else had occurred was never definitively established. Disney attributed responsibility to Dolly. The investigation was inconclusive. Disneyland reopened the Matterhorn the following day using the same bobsled car involved in the incident. This was not the Matterhorn's first fatality. In 1964, 15-year-old Mark Maples had stood up during the ride at its peak, lost his balance, and fallen from the moving vehicle. He died from his injuries days later. In both cases, Disney placed blame on the victims rather than the attraction. June 2024. A Disney employee, a golf cart at 20 miles per hour, and a handrail that broke when she reached for it. Story 12. The golf cart death. June 5, 2024. Disneyland, Anaheim, California. 60-year-old Bonnie Lear was a beloved administrator at Club 33, Disneyland's exclusive private club that has operated within the park for decades. She was riding as a passenger in a golf cart traveling through the backstage areas near Critter Country, seated in the rear alongside 3 other passengers. The cart was moving at approximately 20 miles per hour when the driver swerved to avoid a pothole. Bonnie reached instinctively for the handrail beside her seat. The handrail broke. She fell from the moving cart and struck the ground head first. The impact caused severe brain swelling. 2 days later, on June 7, 2024, Bonnie Lear died. The investigation by OSHA found that Disneyland had failed to provide a safe working environment, specifically citing the broken handrail as a maintenance failure. Disney issued a statement expressing condolences to Bonnie's family. Bonnie Lear had worked within the walls of the happiest place on Earth for years. She died inside those same walls because a handrail broke when she needed it most. 12 stories. 12 people who walked into a Disney park and never fully came home from it. Disney parks remain among the most visited entertainment destinations on the planet, and the vast majority of guests pass through without incident. That statistical reality is genuine. But statistics are not the families of Marcelo Torres, or Brandon Zucker, or Lane Graves, or Debbie Stone. Statistics are not Bonnie Lear reaching for a handrail and finding nothing there. What connects these 12 stories is not bad luck. It is a pattern of decisions made by a corporation large enough and wealthy enough to have known better in almost every case. Maintenance warnings ignored. Wrong materials substituted. Safety equipment not provided. Warning signs never posted. Rides reopened within hours of deaths occurring on them. Disney sells the idea that inside their parks, the world is perfectly managed and perfectly safe. These 12 stories suggest that the management of their image has sometimes come before the management of the real dangers their guests and employees faced. Drop a comment below. Which of these stories affected you most? Did any of them change how you think about the places we trust to keep us safe? Subscribe for more stories told honestly rather than carefully.